Her ring hit the table before I could even take a full breath. It was this tiny sound like a whisper in metal. Barely there, but it cut through everything. She didn't look at me. Just turned her head slightly, eyes fixed on the window. Like she was watching herself disappear into the city lights. I stood there for a second, just standing. Because what do you say when a married woman invites you into silence like that? I said the only thing that made sense in that moment. My voice was low, tight. You're married. And without even turning around, without hesitation, she said it. Soft, final, like a permission slip she wrote in her own blood. Not tonight. That was all. 2 words. 2 words that broke every rule we'd built between us. Every little line we swore we'd never cross. She wasn't asking. She wasn't seducing. She was letting go. Of him. Of them. Of being good, or strong, or right. The room was warm, but not cozy. Dim, but not dark. 1 lamp in the corner. 1 bed with too many layers. 1 woman who was someone else's wife, and 1 man who shouldn't have come. Our bodies weren't touching, but the air between us? It felt like the space right before lightning touches earth. There was this kind of pull, slow and steady, like tidewater rising around your ankles before you even realize you're drowning. I could hear her breathing. I could feel my own heart in my throat. And all I kept thinking was, what happens to people who love the right way but still end up here? What happens when you're not chasing sex or danger or thrill? Just a moment where someone actually sees you again? You know, people think cheating is all hot skin and careless nights. But sometimes, it starts with a shoulder leaned too close on a bad day. A conversation that goes a little too long. A laugh that lasts a second more than it should. And suddenly you're here, in a hotel room, staring at a woman who's taken everything off except her guilt. Not touching. Not kissing. Not yet. Just standing in that space where morals start to blur. And hearts start to whisper what mouths won't say. I didn't reach for her. Not yet. Because part of me was still hoping she'd change her mind. Put the ring back on. Walk away. Give us both a way out. But she didn't. She just kept looking out that window. Like the version of herself she used to be was out there somewhere, waiting. So I stood there, watching her, breaking a little more every second. Because I knew what was coming. We both did. And yet neither of us moved. Not because we didn't want to, but because when something feels that wrong and that right at the same time, you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this is the truest version of yourself you've ever met. If you're new here, this is Olivia Touching Tales. Like, subscribe, and sink in with me. This one's deeper. We're just getting started. It didn't start that night. No, it started in a coffee shop. Rain on the windows. Steam rising from 2 untouched mugs. And her laugh. Got her laugh. Not loud. Not flirty. Just free. The kind of sound you don't hear often in a place like that, where everyone's busy pretending to be somewhere else. It floated past me like a secret. Landed softly. Stayed. I don't remember what I was reading. I don't even think I was reading. I just remember the moment she turned her head. And we both pretended not to look. But we did. We saw each other. I think that was the first time I felt it. That quiet ache in the chest when someone's presence feels like home. And danger. And something you've been missing but never knew to name. We weren't introduced. We just started orbiting each other. Close enough to feel the pull. Far enough to still call it coincidence. She always ordered cinnamon in her coffee. Even in summer. She'd tuck her hair behind one ear when she spoke. But leave the other side wild like part of her always needed to stay untamed. We'd talk about nothing. Books. Deadlines. The way the city smelled after rain. But her eyes, they told a different story. Always scanning. Always searching. As if she was trying to memorize the parts of me I wasn't saying. And me? I was trying not to fall. But it's hard not to fall when someone looks at you like they know what your silence sounds like. Our first real conversation? Too much eye contact. Not forced. Not flirty. just locked in. Like we were both listening to something beneath the words. Something deeper, older, sadder. I think we both knew. Even then. The way her fingers brushed mine when we reached for the same napkin. The pause that lasted too long. Her hand pulling back like it burned, but not quickly enough. And then she smiled. Not at me, but at something inside herself. And that's when I realized. She was lonely. Not the kind of lonely you cure with company. The kind that grows roots in your bones. The kind that follows you home and sleeps beside someone else. We never talked about her husband. I never asked. She never offered. But I knew. I saw it in the way her smile tightened when she checked her phone. In the way she always left 5 minutes too soon. In the way she never, ever sat facing the entrance. Guilt wears a shape. And she wore it like silk. Weeks passed like that. Coffees. Conversations. Touches that didn't happen, but almost did. One day, she reached across the table to show me something on her phone. Her coat sleeve slid up just enough for me to see her wrist. There was a faint red mark like she'd been wearing a watch too tight. But she wasn't wearing one. And for a second, I wanted to ask if she was okay. But I didn't, because sometimes asking breaks the spell. And I wasn't ready for it to break. Then came the night I'll never forget. Late. Quiet. We were the last ones in the shop. She sat beside me instead of across. Her shoulder brushed mine. Warm. Soft. And she didn't move away. I turned my head to say something. Something forgettable, probably. But I stopped. Because she was already looking at me. Not at my lips. Not at my eyes. But somewhere deeper. It felt like she was peeling me open layer by layer. Like she was searching for something I didn't even know I was hiding. And then she whispered it. We shouldn't do this. Her voice cracked on the word shouldn't. And I remember thinking, if she really believed that, she wouldn't have said it out loud. She would have run. But she didn't. She stayed. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about cheating. This wasn't about lust. This was about need. She needed to be seen. To be held without expectation. To be touched like she was still someone worth touching. And me? I needed to feel needed. I needed someone to choose me. Even if it was only for a night. Even if it cost us both the comfort of who we were pretending to be. Still, she never touched me. Not until that night. Not until the room was quiet. And she took off everything except her doubt. Not until the lamp hummed behind her. And she stepped out of her shoes like she was stepping out of someone else's story. Not until I said, "You're married." And she answered the only way she could. Not tonight. The truth is, the fall doesn't happen in a kiss, or a bed, or a broken vow. It happens in the space between two people who should have walked away, but didn't. It happens in the pause, in the glance, in the breath you hold when your fingers finally meet. And for us, the fall happened long before the first touch. It happened the day her laugh found me through a fogged-up window, and I forgot how to look away. My relationship wasn't broken. That's the part that always haunts me the most. There was no screaming, no betrayal, no big, ugly moment to point at and say there. That's when it fell apart. It just didn't echo anymore. It was like living in a house that used to feel like home. But now the walls don't remember your voice. The warmth is gone, but the furniture's still there. Everything in its place. Even me. She was kind, my partner. Sweet in the quiet way that sneaks up on you. She'd send me little texts in the morning. Nothing dramatic, just, "Hope today's not too heavy." Or, "Don't forget your umbrella, it's gonna pour later." She'd place a hand on my back when she passed me in the kitchen. Fingertips grazing fabric like she still wanted to care. But it felt like reaching across a canyon. Like I was behind glass. Like no matter how close she got, I wasn't in it anymore. And it wasn't her fault. She hadn't changed. I had. Or maybe the silence between us had grown too loud to ignore. You know that moment when someone says your name, and you realize you haven't heard it spoken with feeling in weeks? That was me. It's not that I was unloved. I was just unseen. I smiled when I was supposed to. I asked about her day. I made dinner some nights. But nothing reached my center. Nothing stirred. I'd lie in bed beside her, her breathing soft and even, and I'd stare at the ceiling feeling like a ghost in my own life. And then, she arrived. Not with fireworks. Not with a bang. But with presence. With eyes that paused. With laughter that cracked something open inside me I didn't know had calcified. She didn't offer me more. She made me feel like I already was. That's the difference people don't talk about. It's not about someone new showing you better. It's about someone looking at you and seeing all the parts that have gone dim and not flinching. She never told me I was special. She didn't need to. She just looked at me like I mattered. And for a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be magnetic, that look was everything. It was terrifying, beautiful, addictive, and I hated myself for craving it, for craving her. Because I wasn't supposed to. Because I had someone. Someone good. Someone loyal. But every time I walked away from that coffee shop, every time I told myself I was drawing the line, I'd find myself right back there, pretending I just needed caffeine. Pretending it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the one place I didn't feel numb. I'd sit across from her, hands curled around a mug, listening to her talk about books or movies or the way the light changed through leaves in the park. And I'd feel more alive in 20 minutes than I had in months. It wasn't sexual, not at first. It was resonance. Her words had color. Her pauses had weight. She saw me and not just the version I performed for the world. She noticed things. The way I tap my thumb when I'm anxious. The fact that I take my coffee black but always sip water first. That I turn my phone upside down when I don't want to be found. She noticed everything I'd been hiding in plain sight. And the worst part? I loved who I was around her. I loved the man I became in that space. The man who listened. Who laughed from his chest. Who didn't have to explain himself. I started seeing myself through her eyes. And it made the version of me back home feel hollow. I wasn't running away. I was running towards something. That's how it felt. I wasn't chasing thrill. I was chasing recognition, affirmation, wholeness, and I knew it was wrong. I knew it every time I smiled at my partner while thinking of someone else. Every time I typed out a text and then deleted it. Every time I stayed late, just in case she showed up at the cafe again. And yet, every time she looked at me with that gentle, unspoken "I know," something in me exhaled. Something that had been clenched for years. I used to walk around with this quiet ache in my chest. This sense that I was living just slightly outside my own life. Like watching a movie where the sound is out of sync. She brought me back into focus. She didn't fill a hole. She reminded me I'd always been whole. Just buried. And when she whispered, "We shouldn't do this," it wasn't just a warning. It was a confession. Because she felt it too. The gravity. The guilt. The grief of being wanted in the wrong context. But the right way. I hated myself for leaning in. But I loved myself more when I was near her. And that's the most dangerous kind of love, isn't it? The kind that makes you feel redeemed. Even as you burn it all down. It was one of those nights that holds too much inside it. Too much wine. Too many words left hanging. Too little space between the things we weren't saying. The city outside was humming like it knew something. Like it had seen this before. And we were sitting across from each other in that tiny booth at the corner bar. The kind with scratched up wood and dim lights that made everything feel like a secret. She had her fingers wrapped around a half-empty glass, spinning it slowly like she was winding herself up. Or down. I could tell something was coming. There was this tightness in her smile. Like she was holding her breath behind her teeth. And then, she just said it. "If I asked you to stop, would you?" She didn't look at me when she said it. She said it like she was throwing it into the space between us. Like if it landed wrong, she could pretend it wasn't hers. I didn't answer right away. Because how do you answer a question that's really an answer in disguise? So I just watched her. And she broke. Not loudly. Not all at once. It started in her hands. The way they stopped moving. The way she stared at the bottom of her glass like it might give her a different life. Then her voice, soft cracking just slightly around the edges. If I told you you were the only one who made me feel seen, would that be enough? She looked up at me then. Eyes glossy, wide open, asking for something she didn't have the language for. Not sex. Not promises. Not escape. Something smaller. Something more dangerous. Recognition. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. Instead, I asked her a question I'd been choking on for weeks. What about him? She exhaled sharp and shaky, like it hurt to even bring him into the room. And then she said something that changed everything. He has all of me, but he doesn't look anymore. There it was. Not bitterness. Not blame. Just grief. Quiet, exhausted grief. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She wasn't trying to betray anything. She was just trying to come back to herself, to remember what it felt like to be in her own life. She leaned back then, shoulders slumping like she'd just put something heavy down. I don't want to cheat, she said. And she meant it. I want to feel alive. Just once. Just one night where I'm not invisible. Where I'm not someone's responsibility. Where I'm not a wife or a placeholder. Or an afterthought. Her words hit me like waves. Because they weren't about me. Not really. They were about her. About the years she'd spent giving and giving and giving until there was nothing left that felt like her own. And still, she wasn't asking for forever. She wasn't asking for a secret life. She was asking for a single night. To feel real again. To be seen and wanted. Without apology. She reached for my hand then. And the way she touched me. It wasn't lust. It was longing. Raw, silent longing. Like maybe I was the only person in the world who could hold this moment with her. Without judgment. Without fear. If we pretend tonight doesn't exist. She whispered. Could it still mean everything? That question didn't need an answer. Because we both knew. If we said yes, there was no going back. No pretending. No forgetting. It would live inside us. Not as a mistake, but as a memory too loud to silence. And somehow that made it worse. And more beautiful. Because sometimes the most powerful things are the ones we never speak of again. She booked the room. No discussion. No second guessing. Just a simple message sent late. Like it had been sitting in her chest all day, waiting for the right breath to push it out. Room 307. No expectations. Just presence. No name. No hello. Just that. I stared at my phone for so long I forgot I was holding it. My hand had gone numb. I remember looking around the room I was in. My living room, quiet, dim, too familiar. And feeling like it didn't belong to me anymore. Like I'd outgrown it. Like something inside me was already standing in that hotel hallway, waiting for me to catch up. I didn't reply. I just got in the car. The drive was quiet. I didn't play music. Didn't crack the window. Didn't let my mind wander. It was like my whole body knew. This wasn't a night for distractions. This was a night for listening. The hotel wasn't fancy. It wasn't cheap either. Just ordinary enough to disappear into. I remember the smell when I stepped into the lobby. Clean linen and something floral. Artificial comfort. I took the elevator alone. Watched the numbers light up. My reflection staring back at me in the chrome. I looked calm. But everything inside me was burning. When the doors opened on the third floor, my legs felt like they were carrying someone else. Room 307 was at the end of the hall. I knocked, but there was no sound from inside. Just the quiet click of the lock, and the soft creak of the door swinging open. She didn't greet me. She didn't need to. She was already standing there. at the far end of the room, in front of the window, bare-shouldered, facing the city like she was saying goodbye to it. She was wearing something soft and dark, not revealing, just bare enough to make the air between us feel thick. She didn't turn around, didn't speak, her back to me, her silence louder than her words. On the nightstand by the bed, her wedding ring was sitting quietly, not hidden, not symbolic, just there, like something shed, not stolen. The light from the window traced her skin, pale gold on the slope of her shoulder, a faint line down the curve of her spine. It wasn't lust that filled the room. It was grief, longing, the kind of intimacy that asks nothing except to be witnessed. I stood in the doorway, frozen, and for a moment, I wanted to run. I wanted to stay forever. I did neither. I just walked toward her. Each step felt like a vow I didn't know how to make. When I got close enough to touch her, I didn't. I just stood there, breathing with her, listening to the silence between us. She spoke then, barely above a whisper. "There's only one rule," she said. "We don't talk about what happens after." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a beginning. It was a moment sealed in glass, a snow globe of need and bravery and soft rebellion. Nothing would survive outside of it. And maybe that's why it felt so real, so painfully alive. Because it didn't have to be more than this. It just had to be. If the person you love is starving in your arms, would you blame them for reaching out? Would you call it betrayal? Or just survival? Because that's what it felt like. Not a choice, not a scheme, but an instinct. Something inside her said, "I can't go on like this." And I was just there when the dam broke. She never called again. There were no follow-up texts, no letters, no loose ends to tie up, just silence. That same, sacred silence we shared the morning after. But now on the other side of everything, still, I carry her in me. Not like a regret, not even like a memory, but like a song I can't forget. One of those haunting ones, with no chorus, just a melody that finds you in strange moments. When the night is too quiet, when your partner reaches for you in their sleep, but their hand never quite lands. When you're standing in the grocery aisle, and you smell something that reminds you of cinnamon and perfume and permission, and your chest aches without warning. I used to think loyalty meant staying, showing up, being there. Now I wonder, is loyalty about staying? Or about seeing someone so deeply that they don't have to leave? Because what we shared that night, it wasn't about leaving. It was about returning. To herself. To truth. To hunger that finally had a name. So I'll ask you honestly, what would you do? If the person you loved was drowning in silence, and someone else finally taught them how to breathe again, would you hold it against them? Or would you wonder why it wasn't you? Tell me what you'd do. I'm genuinely curious. And if this stirred something in you, even just a flicker of recognition, of ache, of wanting to understand your own story a little deeper, stay with me. This is Olivia Touching Tales. Subscribe for more stories you don't want to forget. She turned around slowly. No rush, no performance, just presence. Her eyes met mine, and I swear the whole room shifted, like it exhaled. She reached up, fingertips barely grazing my cheek. Not claiming me, not seducing me, just reminding me I was still here. "Let me be slow with you," she whispered. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a plea. It was a gift. Her hands moved like breath. Not urgent, not demanding, just there, tender, attentive, deliberate. Her touch didn't say, "I want you." It said, "You're safe here." She traced the lines of my face like she was learning something holy. Like every scar and wrinkle told her a story I'd forgotten how to tell. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I was being looked at. I felt seen. She kissed my neck soft, slow, and her lips didn't press, they rested. like she was laying something down between us. A sorrow, maybe? A history. It wasn't about desire yet. It was about permission. Then something shifted. A breath caught in her throat. A weight moved behind her eyes. The air between us changed. And when our lips finally touched, it didn't feel like starting something. It felt like releasing something. Her kiss tasted like a held-back apology, like laughter that had dried up, like the kind of hunger you pretend not to feel because no one ever asked if you were starving. She leaned into me, and I felt the years fall off of her. Not in a girlish way. In a freeing way. Like she was peeling away layers of silence, and shame, and smallness. I undid the buttons of her blouse, slowly, like I was unraveling a secret she never meant to keep. She trembled. Not from cold. Not from fear. From being touched like she mattered. Her skin was warm, but her eyes were on fire. And all I could think was, God, how long has it been since someone touched her like this? Not to take, but to honor. And then, she took the lead. Gently, but unmistakably. She pressed her hand to my chest and pushed me back, guiding me to sit. Don't speak, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was steady. A woman who had waited too long to be anything but clear. She straddled me, not to seduce, but to center herself. Her gaze locked onto mine. Not playful, not performative, but sovereign. She wasn't asking for validation. She wasn't seeking approval. She was reclaiming something. Something primal. Something sacred. Something buried under years of being quiet and small. Her fingers gripped my jaw as if to say, look at me. Stay with me. Feel this. And I did. Every movement was purposeful. Measured. Her rhythm not frantic, but focused. And, beneath all of it, I felt her saying, I remember who I was before I became someone's wife. But it wasn't just her leading, because somewhere in the middle of it, our bodies started speaking in both directions. She moved. And I followed. I reached. And she held. We danced at the edge of too much. And not enough. She would gasp, and I would steady her. I would groan, and she would smile like she knew that sound had been buried in me for years. Her hands gripped my back, pulling me into something deeper than want. Something that felt like surrender and defiance wrapped in the same breath. I touched her like she was an answer to a question I didn't know I'd been asking. She responded like her body had been waiting for this dialogue her whole life. She wasn't one thing. She was many. Soft and wild. Still and restless. Quiet and screaming with everything unspoken. By the time we moved to the bed, there were no roles anymore. No structure. No rules. Just a blur of limbs, breath, sound. We weren't two people. We were one experience. Every inch of her was a language I didn't know I was fluent in. Every gasp was a confession. Every sigh a release. I couldn't tell where I ended and she began. She wrapped her arms around me like she was anchoring herself. Like if she let go, the moment would vanish. And then, she whispered it. I forgot who I was before you touched me like this. It shattered me, because I knew exactly what she meant. Time disappeared. There was no past, no marriage, no consequences. Just this, just us, floating somewhere between sin and salvation. In a room where nothing existed but feeling. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't performing. I wasn't surviving. I wasn't hiding. I was alive. With her. In her. For her. Because of her. And when we finally collapsed into the silence, sweaty, breathless, undone, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. We hadn't broken any rules. We had just made a new world. One where we could be everything we were never allowed to be. I felt it happen. Not suddenly. Not like some cinematic gasp or perfectly timed release. No. It was quieter than that. Slower. Deeper. I felt her let go. Not just of him, but of the version of herself she'd been clinging to. The wife. The nice girl. The woman who always said, "I'm fine." It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't even escape. It was return. Her body softened beneath me. Not in exhaustion, but in surrender. Like she was melting into the truth of what she'd always needed. To be held like she mattered. To be touched like she wasn't fragile, but precious. She buried her face in my neck. And I swear I felt something ancient unravel between us. The kind of ache you don't cry out loud. Just exhale. Our bodies were still moving. But the rhythm was different now. No more proving. No more hiding. It felt like standing in the center of a thunderstorm with no rain. The kind of tension that hums through your bones, but doesn't demand to be released. Only felt. She gripped my shoulders like she was grounding herself, and I pressed my forehead to hers, our breaths tangling like lovers in their own right. We didn't rush. We didn't force. We just stayed inside the moment, letting it bloom, letting it break us open. And when she finally shattered beneath me, it wasn't violent. It was sacred. A slow collapse. A soft gasp. A body saying thank you in the only language it knows. I followed, not to reach something, but to meet her where she was. And as my body gave in, as my breath caught and scattered into her skin, I felt it. Not ecstasy, not release. Completion. Like being shattered and reassembled by her breath. We didn't speak. We didn't move. We just held. Her fingers laced into mine. Tight at first, like fear still lingered. Then loosening, like trust had taken root. She was trembling. So was I. But it wasn't from the high. It was from the weight of what we'd just opened. What we'd just touched. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel right. It felt real. More real than any promise I'd ever made. More honest than any vow she'd ever whispered. We stayed like that. Skin on skin. Soul to soul. For what felt like a lifetime. And in the stillness, I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. I wasn't hungry anymore. I wasn't aching or yearning or reaching. I was hollowed out but full. Like something had been taken from me. And replaced with something heavier. Deeper. Unbearably alive. She looked at me. Eyes raw. Mouth parted like she wanted to speak but knew words would ruin it. So we said nothing, because there was nothing left to explain. We'd already told the truth. With our bodies. With our silences. With every unspoken wound we chose to kiss instead of ignore. And in that quiet aftermath, the world outside didn't exist. There was no husband. No partner. No consequences. Just breath. And warmth. And the strange, impossible feeling that maybe, for just one night, we'd both been loved the way we were always meant to be. She fell asleep with her head on my chest. Her breath soft, rising and falling like waves that no longer needed to crash. And I didn't move. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want the moment to end. I watched her. The way her brow slowly unknotted. The way her fingers curled on my ribs, relaxed like a storm had passed. She looked so young in that moment. Not in age, but in spirit. Like she'd just been reborn from the ashes of her own expectations. The morning light crept through the curtains, painting golden lines across her bare shoulder. And I noticed. Her ring was back on. It glinted in the soft light, resting peacefully on her finger. As if it had never left. And maybe that's what struck me the hardest. Not the night we shared. Not the hunger we fed. But the quiet way she returned to her world. Like this was always temporary. But never meaningless. She stirred, turned her face toward me, still half asleep. Her eyes barely open. And then, with a voice so fragile it felt like it belonged to another world, she whispered, "Thank you for giving me back to myself. Not thank you for the night. Not thank you for the touch. Not even thank you for the risk. Just thank you for me." It hit me harder than any kiss ever could, because that's what it was. Not an affair. Not a betrayal. Not a thrill. A return. She wasn't mine. I wasn't hers. But we met fully. Truthfully. In a space most people never get to visit. Let alone share. There were no promises after that. No, what now? No, will we do this again? Just silence. The good kind. The knowing kind. I got dressed without waking her. Moved slowly, like every sound might undo what we'd just created. And when I looked back one last time, she hadn't stirred. Just a soft rise and fall beneath the sheets. A woman whole again. Even if no one else would ever know how. I left the room quietly. My footsteps swallowed by hallway carpet. My hands shaking not from shame, but from the weight of having held something real. Later that afternoon, I walked into my home. Same walls. Same scent of lavender and laundry and old books. Same woman standing by the window, sipping coffee. Her hair pulled back. Her eyes soft when they found mine. She looked at me, the same way she always had. And that nearly undid me, because now I could see it. The silence behind her smile. The spaces where she had tried to reach me. And I didn't even notice. I loved her. God, I did. But for the first time, I understood her silence. Not as distance. Not as failure. But as a language I never bothered to learn. She didn't ask where I'd been. Didn't press. Didn't flinch. She just reached out. Touched my arm lightly. And said, "Dinner's in the oven." I nodded. Held her hand a little longer than I should have. And in that quiet, I realized I'd touched one woman's body and found another woman's soul, and neither of them belonged to me. If the person you love is starving in your arms, would you blame them for reaching out? Would you call it betrayal? Or just survival? Because that's what it felt like. Not a choice. Not a scheme. But an instinct. Something inside her said, "I can't go on like this." And I was just there when the dam broke. She never called again. There were no follow-up texts. No letters. No loose ends to tie up. Just silence. That same, sacred silence we shared the morning after. But now on the other side of everything, still, I carry her in me. Not like a regret. Not even like a memory. But like a song I can't forget. One of those haunting ones. With no chorus. Just a melody that finds you in strange moments. When the night is too quiet. When your partner reaches for you in their sleep, but their hand never quite lands. When you're standing in the grocery aisle, and you smell something that reminds you of cinnamon and perfume and permission, and your chest aches without warning. I used to think loyalty meant staying, showing up, being there. Now I wonder, is loyalty about staying? Or about seeing someone so deeply that they don't have to leave? Because what we shared that night, it wasn't about leaving. It was about returning. To herself. To truth. To hunger that finally had a name. So I'll ask you honestly, what would you do if the person you loved was drowning in silence and someone else finally taught them how to breathe again? Would you hold it against them? Or would you wonder why it wasn't you? Tell me. Tell me what you'd do. I'm genuinely curious. And if this stirred something in you, even just a flicker of recognition, of ache, of wanting to understand your own story a little deeper, stay with me. This is Olivia Touching Tales. Subscribe for more stories you don't want to forget.